So in a rebuttal, you're normally restricted to trying to respond to what the other debater has just presented to you. So I'll try and do that. Let's talk about some things here. I heard Mayor Fougere say that this is their P3 is is a fixed price contract. So I want to just find you. Well, if you look on the PPP Canada website, there's a guide there for municipalities, and it contains in it a definition of design, bid, build, which is what we're recommending. And what it says is design, bid, build. The public agency figures out what it is they need. They get a private company to design it. They get a private company to build it. It's often done as a fixed price contract, thereby transferring the risk to the private operator. Right? That's the definition, not mine, although it's the one I think that's widely used. It's the one from PPP Canada. That's exactly what the city of Saskatoon did when they built that bridge. They had penalties built in for the contractor. So this is not something unique to a P3. The mayor keeps saying this, but that's simply not true. That's the first issue I'd raise. The second one, let's let me get back to my notes here. The second one, he keeps talking about this thing about control. This is not about getting someone in to fix your house. This is about bringing in a private corporation to run that plant. All of the employees will be transferred from the city. They will cease being city employees. They will become employees of the contractor. Now, it was a long time ago, 12, 13, 14 years. I used to negotiate a contract in this place for the support staff. And it was very clear in all the contracts I ever negotiated, the operator controls that workforce. Every day, your boss tells you what to do. It is your duty as an employee to do what you are told, to follow that work, to carry that work out according to the instructions of your employer. That's what we're talking about. Who is going to be supervising and directing those very skilled, but nevertheless employees of that wastewater treatment plant? And it will be a private operator. Yes, we'll own it, and we'll have a 30-year contract. Told you how old my grandchildren are going to be in 30 years. I'm going to be 93. I'll be damn lucky if I'm still alive when this contract comes back that we can renegotiate it. So that's the problem. This is a huge long-term process. This is not 2 or 3 years out. This is 30 years we're getting locked in for. That's the other question, I guess. The unanimity of council, they voted on it, but you didn't hear the mayor talk about the key thing. He said we're going to get $20 million. This is the value for money. This is the risk, some of this is the risk transfer. And the problem is always in these things, and the British have said it, and the Auditor Generals have said it, is those calculations are secret. In fact, when they looked at the P3s in the hospital sector in England, what they said was, those value for money figures are always secret, always impossible to verify, and always just the right amount to make the private delivery of the service competitive with public delivery. It is a shell game, unless you can go behind them and see. But we have not seen these ones, and it doesn't look like we're ever going to get to see them. So that's the key function here. It's the issue of secrecy and the issue of accountability in here. What we would say, just in kind of summing up, I guess, is that we think that this question of water and wastewater, the British Medical Journal said the question of provision of public sewage system was the most important medical advance in the last 170 years. It did more to save life than everything else. DNA, antibiotics, anything. Sewage is the key, right? The first step in terms of having a healthy life. So we say it is simply too important to be left to a profit-driven system. It needs to remain in public control. We live in a very dry, semi-arid place. Most years, evaporation exceeds precipitation. We need to have the flexibility to respond to a changing climate. We need the flexibility of keeping public control. We cannot be locked into a 30-year secret deal.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Mayor Fougere, you now have 5 minutes for your rebuttal.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Interesting comments, and appreciate the fact we can talk about two sides of the same coin here. But I think what we have here is facts and not fear. And we have some fear going on here. When I refer to a couple of ads, and there are a few that are around here, that part of the issue, this is a very complicated process, very complicated project. And most people are just becoming engaged in what this all means. So when they see these terms, P3 privatization will cost more in the end because we'll be paying more corporate profit. This ad here, you may have seen this. I have to tell you, it's very obvious that under Mr. Holmes' model, the private sector builds it for profit as well. The issue is, you don't know what the profit's going to be because there's no control of cost for the project. Under P3, it's capped at $224.3 million and a fixed price contract. But this kind of information, frankly, may get people worried that we're trying to privatize our water. We want it to remain public. I just heard Mr. Holmes say just now, he said, yes, we own it. Well, that's the first time I heard him say that. He's making the obvious, that we own it. Of course we own it. These ads talk of something quite different, that we're privatizing it. And I think that's unfair because it's fear, not facts, we're talking about here. And this is important. Borrowing costs. I have a report that was submitted by CUPE at the executive committee meeting when we decided this. And I can refer to a page in here. They admit that the borrowing cost, the interest rate between the private sector and government is narrowing to always be negligible. And as I've said publicly before, in general terms, but not this specific deal because you haven't gone to the market yet to go for a loan, the spread between government and private sector in water and wastewater is 0.5 to 1%. Now I believe that the document that Mr. Holmes speaks of, they assume that the borrower, the private borrower would have to get 2% above the city of Regina rate. It's just simply not true. So we have a lot of information that is simply not accurate, and it's half a story. The employees keep the same collective agreement, the same job they have. It's under succession rights, they must have the same collective agreement, they're protected. You know, we talk about a 30-year deal, secret deal. I just said again that when this deal is negotiated, it goes to council, and it's a public document. And we're very confident, given the work that's been done, the background work that's been done for a number of years, that it's a comprehensive contract that protects the interests of taxpayers. Our interest as council is to ensure that your tax dollars are used wisely, that we stretch them for what we can. That's our interest. It is not about clouding the issue about privatizing and talking about water, drinking water being in this issue. It is unfair, it clouds the issue, it confuses people, and maybe that's the intent, I don't know. But for me, it's very clear what this is about. It's gaining access to federal money, $58.5 million, to lower the tax burden on Regina residents. It's protecting our ownership rights. We own it and we control it. Yes, we have others doing that, but we collect, we actually set the rates for the utility. Not the company, we do. If they ask for something more excessive, the answer is no. Those rates that we set for utility goes beyond the sewage treatment plant. It actually goes for the pipes in the ground and to repair those over time. Yes, we have collected money that will be used for the sewage treatment plant in our reserve, but it's also used to maintain our infrastructure that's aging. As part of the $2 billion I spoke of that we're behind in terms of our ability to get those fixed. It's absolutely clear what the message is here. What we're seeing from the Water Watch side is moving into the area of fear versus fact. And that's unfortunate. If you want to have a discussion of the facts, let's have them, but let's not scare people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Fougere. So now we're going to go into, each side submitted 3 questions. I think you got the questions on Monday, if I recall correctly. So they've seen the questions that each side has prepared, and we're going to alternate back and forth in terms of these written questions. And I think a few of these subjects we've already touched on a little bit, but nonetheless, these are the questions, and we'll alternate, and I'll go to Mr. Holmes first with his first question. It is, Regina Water Watch alleges that drinking water is being privatized. Why is Water Watch making that allegation when in fact this project is for sewage treatment only?
This is a question that came from the mayor, and it sort of reinforces something I think is all those times I went to city council, he wasn't listening. We have never said this was about drinking water. It's not. It's about the wastewater treatment plant. It's not about Buffalo Pound. It's about the plant out west of town, right? The wastewater treatment plant. That's the first thing. That was the petition, the wastewater treatment plant petition. That's what it was called. And that's what it talked about in there. That and what it contained, what is now the ballot question. the one that we proposed and wrote, and the one that the city council unanimously, because they do most things unanimously, that they unanimously approved. And it is that the city of Regina publicly finance, operate, and maintain the new wastewater treatment plant. The only people I've ever heard say that Water Watch says it's about drinking water is the city. So I'm not sure who's spreading confusion here. But anyway, that's what you're voting on. That's the ballot question on September 25th. But there is a bigger issue here. It is the wastewater treatment. That's what it's called. You go out there, that's what the sign says. It got renamed this summer, the sewage treatment plant. Okay? In fact, if you look on the website, there are actually documents that have been rewritten to take wastewater treatment out and insert sewage treatment plant. Same text, but they've changed the wording. It's bizarre. It's another word invented by a spin doctor, just like the $276. It's a figure invented by a spin doctor. Okay? The key thing to remember is our water comes out of Buffalo Pound. Buffalo Pound's water comes out of the Qu'Appelle system. Qu'Appelle comes out of Lake Diefenbaker, out of the Saskatchewan system. The Saskatchewan is made up of the Bow and the Old Man and the Red Deer. All those people are putting wastewater into our water. And then we're putting it back into Wascana Creek, which in most of the year is 90% sewage effluent. That goes into the Qu'Appelle and out all those ways along to Portage, takes their water out of there. Again, we've talked about residential wastewater is 99% water. Okay? It's important, very important, that it be cleaned and put back into the environment in absolutely the best condition. But it is water mainly. Okay? When we had our town hall there last Wednesday, we had a retired Environment Canada scientist, Marley Wazer, who spent her whole professional life studying water, mostly in Canada, but in Japan and in the Mediterranean. And she studied Wascana Creek and what was in it. And what she said to us was, you shouldn't be calling this wastewater. We live in a very arid climate. Most years, the evaporation exceeds the precipitation. We're dependent on that water coming out of the Rocky Mountains. All the water here is precious. You cannot think of any of it as being waste. You have to respect all of that water. It's all absolutely essential to our life here.
Okay, thank you very much. And I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, it's 3-minute response to the questions, correct? But I'll go to you next, Mayor, right? Yeah. So now, question to the Mayor. The city says there will be $21 million savings in risk transfer. Risk transfer is the cost of problems that might arise in the design, building, or operation of the plant. Risk transfer calculations are controversial. Will you tell us the cost assigned to each risk factor for the public and private sector in the Deloitte report?
Thanks for the opportunity to respond to this. And actually, the question's incorrect. The assumptions are incorrect. It's not $21 million. I'm not certain how you got to that point unless you netted out the net present value of the formulation. But essentially what we're talking about here is risk. Risk to the owner, risk to the taxpayer. Who covers the risk, who pays for that? In a design bid build, very bluntly said, with all the risk rests with the owner, which is the citizens of Regina. 70% of public projects on design bid build that are larger projects are over budget. This is a study out of Great Britain and comes through the government of Canada. So this is a risk for taxpayers. So we believe very strongly in council to shift that risk to the builder. That is what a P3 does. It shifts cost overruns, it shifts delays off the backs of taxpayers and onto the builder. They will accept the risk because they've built these before and they understand the margins they need, and they accept that. They certainly have a revenue stream for 30 years, and that's attractive to them. But in terms of the construction of that, there's no question this is better. So, no, this isn't widely criticized. This is transfer of risk. It is a new way to look at how we fund our public institutions. These are very successful in Canada. As Mr. Eisler mentioned earlier, Canada is one of the leaders in public-private partnerships. But I want to stress that council does not look at this as a panacea, as the way to solve everything. We backed into a P3 on this project after we evaluated other models that didn't fit the bill, that were more expensive, that we couldn't have support from the federal government on. So that answer, the question, the supposition is incorrect. The level of risk transfer is nowhere near $21 million.
Thank you. We'll get to questions from the floor later, written questions. Okay, question number 2 to Jim Holmes. How will Regina Water Watch protect city taxpayers from cost overruns and project delays for the sewage treatment plant? Can this group in fact guarantee, as the P3 does, that the design bid build will not cost more than $224 million?
Well, I think we need to start by understanding that the city cannot guarantee this one that costs more than $224 million. The federal grant is $58.5 million. You've heard Mayor Foucher said it a number of times. You'll see it in all the city's advertising. So I was just told, actually, that those fancy phones, which I'm never good at working, have a calculator on them. The P3 grant is 25% of the cost. Multiply 58.5 by 4. You can take your phone out and do it right now. You won't get $224 million. You'll get $234 million. When we asked whether the $10 million came from, oh, that's fees for lawyers and brokers and consultants, and that's typical of P3 projects. They have those kinds of extra costs attached to them. Costs, our analyst said about $500,000 for the city to arrange the financing for a project like this, for a typical traditional project. Okay? So that's the first question. The city has already said that this project is costing $234 million, up from $153 million about 14 months ago. Now, this is a very strange question. How are we going to guarantee it? If the referendum passes, then it's the duty of the city administration to carry out the wish of the voters. Okay, it's not up to Water Watch. We're not going to have a coup d'etat and take over the city of Regina. But since he asked for our advice on this question, I'm going to try it one more time. Design, bid, build contract should be a fixed price contract, and that is something that's done all the time. You don't need a P3 to have a fixed price contract. I think I've repeated that about 4 times so far. I'm not making that up. Deloitte says it, PPP Canada says it, City of Saskatoon does it. Okay, so that's the first question, okay, fixed price contract. Second one, we think it's likely that the plant isn't going to cost $234 million, and we talked about this 50% jump, okay? In Western Canada, construction for projects like this is rising about 5% a year. There are no figures for Regina, but Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, about 5% a year. So perhaps 20% is a reasonable cost overrun. So there's a big cushion in there. If that advice is enough for them, I would suggest that they call Mayor Bob Maloney in Yorkton. I did, and talked to him about it. He brought in their water treatment plant on schedule, on budget, and won environmental awards for it. If you talk to Bob, he'll brag quite a lot about what great staff he has on the city. Unlike here, he doesn't apologize for his staff. They won an environmental award from that. So City of Yorkton can show you how to do it if you don't know how to do it, to bring it in on budget.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Okay, thank you. All right, second question for the mayor. You have promised to provide figures on how much profit the people of Regina will pay to a private corporation over the 30-year term of this agreement. Will you provide that information to us tonight?
To say that the first part in terms of a profit on either design but build or a public-private partnership primarily is the result of the bidding process. You can make assumptions on what that profit margin might be, but what it actually is on any competitive process, you don't know what those numbers are. But what I can tell you is that both in design bid build, there's going to be a profit because the city will not build it by itself. So on the one hand, we have a criticism of corporate profits by the Water Watch is a bad thing under P3s, but it seems to be okay on a design bid build. It's the same company that's going to build it. The private sector will build it. The government will not build a very advanced, technologically advanced entity. Won't do it. Simply won't happen. So no one can say what that profit margin is going to be in absolute terms until the RFP goes out, and we get a response. And to say otherwise would be misleading. But mind you, when either one are bidding, they're bidding to get the project, so they are going to be as efficient as they can, particularly on the P3, to be as efficient and innovative as possible to win the bid. And they talk about margins being less and less to do that very thing. So no one can say what those are going to be in absolute terms, and those who say that are misleading, and again, misinformation about the process. Fact, not making up information.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, we'll now go to the third and last question to Jim Holmes, and then we'll come back to the Mayor for his final question. So, to Mr. Holmes, the Mayor and City Council have been open and transparent on how much money is being invested to educate the public on the P3 approach for the sewage treatment plant. How much has Regina Water Watch and CUPE spent to date, and why have they not disclosed how much money they are spending on their advertising campaign?
Investing in education is sort of a funny term for the information the city's been putting out. But in any case, the question, I think, is just about a whole different view of the world and how things are organized. It shows that the city doesn't know anything at all about what Regina Water Watch is. Everybody who's involved in it, including me, is a volunteer. They're there because they chose to be there. Okay? People bring different things to that group, to Water Watch. Some people bring money, and some people bring expertise and their wisdom. Everyone has to bring a lot of hard work. And anyone who shows up at one of our meetings can discuss what we're doing and can debate that and can decide what we're going to do next, and we expect them to work. Okay? But we don't ask people when they say they're going to help with Water Watch how much they're going to help. We're just really happy if anyone will help at all. Okay? So I don't have any idea how many thousands and thousands of hours our volunteers have contributed to this campaign. Okay? I'm just always in awe that the people who show up and how hard they work on it. And by the same token, I have no idea how much money CUPE has contributed to this campaign. We talk about what we're going to do, but I have no connection with CUPE. They don't answer to me. They are one of our coalition partners, and people bring different contributions, and we don't ask them how much their contribution is going to be. Okay? What I can see when I look around is that the paid advertising we've been doing is like totally overwhelmed by the advertising of the city, which is being paid for with your money. Yeah. Let's take a look at this. The city's paying $340,000 in taxpayers' dollars on a campaign that includes billboards all over the city. And yeah, we have some billboards because we have some people who help us with money. But we have 700 people who've donated their lawns so we can put up lawn signs. That's where our strength comes from. The city's spending $340,000 on a campaign that includes a mail-out to every household in the city. We have volunteers who go around and deliver things house to house, deliver our literature. The city has spent $340,000 on a campaign that's based on a secret report with most of the pages blanked out. We spend our money on a public report. We spent our money on a town hall right here last week so people have a better understanding. The city spent part of their campaign money on robocalls to your house over and over and over again. Okay? We have people who are donating their time to do our calling. And we have volunteers who spent thousands of hours gathering those 24,000 signatures on the petition. Okay? The city has bureaucrats collecting salaries who are working for their campaign. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, final question goes to the mayor before we go to questions from the audience, written questions. So, Mr. Mayor, many cities have decided to get out of P3 agreements with water corporations because of high prices, poor service, and declining quality. Will you tell us how much it would cost us to buy our way out of this deal?
Well, actually, on the contrary, there are more and more municipalities and governments going to public-private partnerships. It's quite the opposite. It strengthens the position of taxpayers. It reduces risks, as I've said before. The Conference Board of Canada, independent of any government, says that 83% again are on time and on budget. These are attractive features for governments that have a shortage of cash to do the deal. There's no question about that. So I don't agree with the supposition that people are getting out of them. I can tell you that in Alberta, with the floods that took place this spring, the public-private partnerships, their municipality didn't pay for the repair of their water system. The taxpayers did not do that. It was by the company that was operating and maintaining it. These are important issues to consider, that it's not on the backs of millions of dollars that would be on the backs of taxpayers. I would just say that from my perspective, there are more being used. Canada is seen as a leader in this process, and there is many, as you can speak of disasters or problems, there are major successes of water and wastewater plants around the country that are P3. So what would it cost to get out of the deal? Why would we want to get out of the deal? We know we signed an agreement that we would be very sure is ironclad and benefit the city. Why would we want to break the deal? We would have a company that would assume the risk of damage and issues related to maintenance and operation that are not on the backs of the city of Regina taxpayers. Wouldn't want to do that. We make very sure in the front end, doing our homework and due diligence, that company would be responsible for those very things we're concerned about. We'd be stretching our tax dollars, protecting taxpayers from undue risk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so now we're and I think we've got a lot of questions. Been watching them come up here. We're obviously not going to be able to get to all of them. And I think Dan and Kathy have tried to group these into different to a specific individual or to both of them. And there's more for the mayor than there is for Jim. Imagine that. Okay, so we'll get started on this last phase of the evening, and I just want to get a few shots in myself if I can before I turn it over to the moderator. Yeah, well, a couple of things. I mean, we're talking about private interest, public good. Can these two things work together? Is there a way that the private economy can serve a positive public function? I think that's self-evident throughout our economy. Our largely private economy delivers all sorts of public goods to us. So there's no question that can happen. My question is to Jim. There's a certain sort of assumption here that the union interests, CUPE in this particular case, are aligned with the public good. And in fact, the union is a private interest. It's not a public interest, it's a private interest for the interest of its members, of the individual members. And